walls of the Brest Fortress lies a world known to few. Kilometers of secret tunnels, hidden chambers, and mysterious structures built over more than a century. History was made here, from Tsarist times to the present day. What secrets do the underground passages of this legendary fortress hold? What secrets remain undiscovered? Today, we will embark on a journey through the secret underground world of the Brest garrison and find out what happened in the depths, hidden from prying eyes. If you are interested in the secrets of the Brest Fortress underground, subscribe to our channel. Here you will find even more fascinating historical investigations. Be sure to share your opinion in the comments. Do you think that all the secrets of the underground garrison have already been revealed? Or are there still unknown mysteries hidden there? At the very beginning of the 19th century, at the crossroads of eras and interests of great powers, a plan was conceived that would forever change the fate of the city of Brest. The geographical location of this ancient settlement was not accidental. It was a meeting point of strategically important trade and military routes connecting Eastern and Western Europe. It was for these reasons that Emperor Nicholas I chose Brest as the site of a future military citadel, a stronghold designed to deter threats from the western borders of the Russian Empire, where the interests of powerful Prussia and the rapidly growing France were in conflict. The history of the construction of the Brest Fortress began in 1833, during a period of large-scale military reforms when Russian military engineering made great strides forward. The fortress was conceived not only as an outpost. Its design included a complex network of defensive structures, including a main citadel and 4 large forts, connected by a complex system of underground communications and tunnels. The construction was supervised by the outstanding engineer Karl Oppermann, who was tasked with creating a true fortress of the future, capable of withstanding a prolonged siege. The initial project was ambitious and large in scale. The newly formed garrison town was to house warehouses, barracks, and command buildings, while the underground section was to conceal everything that could ensure strategic autonomy even in the event of complete encirclement by the enemy. From the very first days of work, the emphasis was not only on powerful walls, but also on invisible defenses, underground galleries, hiding places, communications for troop transfers, ammunition storage, and water supply. The choice of location for construction was special. In the floodplains of the Mukavets and western Bug rivers, the soil allowed for the relatively easy construction of multi-level structural elements. Particular attention was paid to camouflage. Some of the structures were specially hidden from enemy eyes by the terrain, while others were concealed by the clever architectural geometry of the entrances to the catacombs and secret passages leading behind the fortress walls. In the years that followed, after the first stone was laid, the garrison grew rapidly. Separate communal rooms were created for the soldiers, and food supplies were organized with a view to long-term self-sufficiency. By the mid-1840s, the Brest Fortress had become one of the most powerful military structures in the Russian Empire, a benchmark for defensive thinking of its time. During various historical periods, the threat of foreign invasion only intensified, and each new generation of engineers refined plans for further strengthening the defenses. However, from the very beginning, the main emphasis was placed on the invisible part of the garrison: underground warehouses, galleries, water supply systems, and evacuation exits, which made the Brest Fortress virtually impregnable to the enemy at that time. The strategists of the time considered this task accomplished, and soon Brest became a symbol of Russia's unshakable power on its western borders. From that time on, the town of Brest became not just a geographical center, but a symbol of the region's defensive stability. A fundamentally new approach to military architecture and a special emphasis on underground communications turned the fortress into a mystery not only for modern enemy engineers, but also for future generations of researchers. It was then, in the first half of the 19th century, that the foundations were laid for mysteries that would puzzle minds for many decades after the Brest garrison appeared on the historical map of Eastern Europe. From the very first days of the Brest Fortress's creation, the most important attention was paid to the construction of underground structures. At this stage, the unique global experience of Russian military engineers, who combined the classics of fortification art with technological innovations, came to the fore. The main idea was to hide not only warehouses and casemates under multi-ton layers of walls and earthen ramparts, but also a complex network of tunnels capable of saving the defenders in the most difficult times. The construction of underground facilities was carried out in several stages. The best technologies of the time were used to lay kilometers of passages and galleries. Deep trenches were dug by hand, carefully reinforced with stone masonry and bricks, and drainage systems were created to remove groundwater. Special attention was paid to ventilation, so that the garrison could stay underground for a long time. Special air ducts and shafts were designed, and emergency stairways were built in the most hidden areas for quick evacuation. The geometry of the underground passages was designed to ensure the covert transfer of ammunition, the rapid maneuvering of units, and the possibility of unnoticed exit from the fortress for diversionary raids. Many tunnels had double, and in some cases triple, ceilings to increase strength. Trap chambers and false passages were often used to confuse the enemy if they managed to break through. The food and ammunition depots located under the main citadel and in the outer fortification rings deserve special attention. They were designed to provide months of autonomous existence. The water supply system was a particular engineering achievement. Cast iron pipes were laid underground and connected to filtration wells, and in some remote parts of the system, there were even miniature hand-operated pumping stations. The existence of a network of secret passages leading to natural shelters outside the fortified zone was of great importance for the safety of the defenders. These exits were strictly classified, and only the highest command of the garrison knew about some of them. Chronicles of that time record that during the defense, the underground communications allowed not only to change positions, but also to carry out surprise sorties, transfer reserves, or evacuate the wounded. Documents from the 19th century contain information about special underground chambers where secret codes, orders, and archival materials were stored. Headquarters for emergency situations were also located here. The entire underground space of the fortress was designed with military precision. Each section had an alarm system, backup lighting with wick lamps, and fuel reserves. As the years passed, the design of the internal tunnels underwent constant revisions, was reinforced, ceilings were rebuilt, and storage chambers were expanded. As artillery improved, the protective layers above the vaults were reinforced. New brick vaults were added, additional sand filters were poured in, and iron plates were installed. By the beginning of the 20th century, the underground part of the Brest Fortress had become a real underground city, hidden from prying eyes. To an outside observer, it was mysterious. The entrances were carefully camouflaged, and inside was a complex system of passages and shelters, a subject for future researchers and the source of many legends. Each tunnel had its own special atmosphere, a mixture of danger, mystery, and historical significance. The design of the Brest Fortress's defensive system was based on a deep understanding of 19th-century siege warfare tactics. Underground structures played a key role in this concept. They were supposed to enable the garrison to actively defend itself even when completely surrounded by the enemy. Russian military engineers studied the experience of European fortresses and created a unique system that surpassed many foreign counterparts in complexity and effectiveness. The main principle of underground defense was to create a multi-level system of firing positions. From hidden embrasures located in the walls of underground galleries, defenders could fire on attackers while remaining virtually invulnerable to return fire. A distinctive feature of the design was that many firing points were connected by secret passages, which allowed forces to be quickly transferred to the most threatened areas. The system of countermine galleries was a separate engineering achievement. These tunnels were laid under the supposed positions of the besiegers and allowed the defenders to blow up enemy trenches and batteries. If the enemy began digging their own tunnels under the fortress walls, Russian sappers could intercept them in underground battles or destroy them with explosives. Documents from that time indicate that some countermine galleries extended more than a kilometer from the main fortifications. Particular attention was paid to protection from artillery fire. Underground rooms were designed with the possible use of heavy siege weapons by the enemy in mind. The thickness of the ceilings in the most important areas reached several meters, and the arches themselves had a special shape that allowed the impact load to be distributed. At critical points, additional metal beams were installed and air cushions were created to dampen the blast wave. The supply system was organized in such a way that the garrison could withstand a long siege without communication with the outside world. Underground warehouses contained food supplies for up to 6 months, as well as the necessary ammunition and medical supplies. Water was supplied through a system of artesian wells, protected from possible poisoning by the enemy. Some of these wells were located at considerable depths and were known only to a small circle of officers. The communication system allowed the command to maintain contact between different sections of the defense, even under heavy fire. For this purpose, special communication tubes laid in the thickness of the walls were used, as well as a system of light signals through periscopic devices. In the most secret areas, primitive but effective mechanical message transmission systems were used. The layout of the underground rooms provided for the possibility of street fighting inside the fortress itself. If the enemy managed to break through the outer fortifications, the defenders could continue their resistance from underground positions, turning each building into a separate fortress. To this end, many basements were connected by passageways, and loopholes were built into the walls of the houses for firing. The psychological aspect of defense was also taken into account in the design. The underground rooms were intended to give the defenders a sense of security and confidence in their abilities. To this end, the galleries were made quite spacious and provided with good lighting and ventilation. At the same time, a complex system of tunnels was designed to disorient the enemy in case they broke through the fortifications. The uniqueness of the Brest Fortress lay in the fact that its underground part was not just a refuge, but an active element of defense. From secret exits, the garrison could launch sorties against the besiegers, disrupt their communications, and strike at rear facilities. This tactic required highly trained personnel and precise knowledge of all the features of the underground system. August 1914 was a turning point in the history of the Brest Fortress. With the outbreak of World War I, the ancient walls and underground galleries had to prove their effectiveness in real combat conditions for the first time in decades of peace. The strategic location of the fortress on the western border of the Russian Empire made it one of the first targets of the German offensive. and soon the defenders found themselves face to face with the modern military machine of the Kaiser's army. Preparations for the defense began in July, when it became clear that war was inevitable. The garrison, under the command of General Lai Mung, began to actively use underground communications to store additional ammunition and organize hidden firing positions. Particular attention was paid to camouflaging the entrances to the tunnels and preparing alternative evacuation routes in case of a German breakthrough. The first serious battles began in August 1914, when German army units approached the outer fortifications. It was then that the advantages of the underground defense system became fully apparent. Russian troops used hidden galleries for surprise flank attacks, appearing where the enemy did not expect them. Documents from the German command at that time contain complaints about the ghostly tactics of the Russians, who seemed to disappear into the ground after each attack. The siege of the fortress lasted several months, and during that time, the underground structures repeatedly saved the lives of the defenders. When German artillery rained down heavy fire on the surface fortifications, the garrison took cover in deep casemates, and then emerged through a system of tunnels to take up new positions. The countermine galleries proved particularly effective. Russian sappers successfully blew up German trenches and dugouts several times. Accounts from participants in the fighting tell how the underground warehouses ensured the continuity of supplies even during the most difficult moments of the siege. When all ground routes were cut off by artillery fire, ammunition and food were delivered through hidden tunnels. The water supply system also proved its worth. Despite damage to external communications, the garrison did not experience a shortage of drinking water. Secret exits from the fortress played a special role in the defense. They were used to organize diversionary raids against German rear facilities, deliver reports to army headquarters, and, at critical moments, evacuate the wounded and important documents. For a long time, the German command could not understand how Russian troops were able to make sorties from a seemingly completely blockaded fortress. The use of poison gas by the Germans against the underground fortifications was a tragic moment. Although most of the galleries had a ventilation system, some areas were vulnerable to gas attacks. This forced the defenders to improvise, creating primitive gas masks and sealing off the most important rooms. The use of chemical weapons against underground structures was one of the first instances in military history. In November 1914, the situation for the garrison became critical. Constant bombing damaged some of the tunnels, and the number of defenders was significantly reduced. Nevertheless, thanks to the underground communications, it was possible to organize a systematic withdrawal of the main forces, preserving their combat capability and avoiding complete encirclement. Documents from the Russian General Staff, declassified many years later, show that the experience of defending the Brest Fortress was carefully studied and used in planning other defensive operations. Information about the effectiveness of underground communications in modern warfare, with the use of heavy artillery and aviation, proved particularly valuable. After the end of active combat operations in the Brest area, many underground structures remained intact. German engineers who studied the captured fortress noted the high quality of Russian fortification art and particularly emphasized the sophistication of the underground defense system. These materials were later used in the design of their own fortifications on the Western Front. The February Revolution of 1917 and the political upheavals that followed turned the Brest Fortress into an arena of complex intrigues and secret negotiations. The underground galleries, originally created for military purposes, witnessed events that radically changed the political map of Eastern Europe. During this period, the fortress changed hands several times, and each new government tried to use its underground structures for its own purposes. After the abdication of Emperor Nicholas II, the fortress garrison found itself in a state of uncertainty. Soldiers' committees took control of most of the surface structures, but the underground communications remained under the control of officers loyal to the old regime. This led to a unique situation in which two parallel power structures existed simultaneously in one fortress: a revolutionary one on the surface and a conservative one in the underground. It was in the underground galleries that secret meetings were held by officers discussing plans to counter the Bolshevik threat. Documents discovered many years later indicate that significant financial resources and archives intended to support the White Movement were stored in hidden rooms in the fortress. Some of these hiding places were never discovered by the Soviet authorities. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, signed in March 1918, transferred the fortress to German control. German troops occupying the fortifications discovered a complex system of underground structures, the existence of which they had only a vague idea about. German engineers conducted a detailed survey of the tunnels and drew up the first accurate plans of the underground part of the fortress. The German command used the underground rooms to house headquarters and warehouses, but their main find was the secret archives of Russian intelligence. Documents containing information about the German spy network in Russia, plans of the Russian special services, and encrypted communication codes were found in hidden chambers. This information was of great value to the German special services and allowed them to inflict serious damage on Russian intelligence. After Germany's defeat in November 1918, the fortress changed hands again. Polish troops who occupied Brest were faced with the need to sort out the complex legacy of the previous owners. Traces of a hasty evacuation by the Germans were found in the underground passages. Some of the documents had been destroyed, but many materials remained untouched. Polish intelligence gained access to valuable information about the activities of German and Russian special services in the region. The Polish period in the history of the fortress was characterized by attempts to modernize the underground structures. New communications were laid, an electric lighting system was installed, and some galleries were adapted to modern needs. Particular attention was paid to the creation of secret weapons and ammunition depots in case of a new war with Soviet Russia. During the Soviet-Polish War of 1919 to 1920, the underground structures were once again used for their intended purpose. The Red Army, which besieged the fortress, encountered the same phenomenon of ghost defense that had previously puzzled the Germans. Polish defenders used the tunnels for surprise attacks and quick retreats, which greatly complicated the assault on the fortifications. Documents about the activities of various intelligence services in the fortress's underground passages are of particular interest. Throughout the period of political upheaval, the tunnels served as a place for secret meetings between agents, storage of compromising materials, and secret operations. Many participants in these events took their secrets to the grave, and it remains unclear what secrets the underground galleries hide. Declassified archives show that in the 1920s, secret negotiations between representatives of various political forces were held in the fortress's underground passages on several occasions. These meetings concerned plans to redraw borders, exchange prisoners, and establish unofficial contacts between the warring parties. The neutral territory of the underground galleries proved to be an ideal place for such delicate negotiations. September 1939 brought new dramatic changes to the fate of the Brest Fortress. The Red Army's entry into western Belarus meant not only a change in political power, but also the need for a complete overhaul of all defensive structures, including the extensive network of underground communications. Soviet military engineers were faced with the task of adapting the fortress to new strategic requirements and modern military doctrines. An initial survey of the underground structures revealed that they were in satisfactory condition but required significant modernization. During their 20 years of administration, the Polish authorities carried out partial reconstruction, installed electric lighting in the main galleries, and improved the ventilation system. However, Soviet specialists discovered that many sections of the underground network remained unexplored, and some passages had been deliberately walled up or classified by previous owners. The Soviet command was particularly interested in information that Polish intelligence had used the underground facilities to create secret warehouses and conspiratorial hideouts. The search for these facilities lasted several months and led to the discovery of several camouflaged chambers containing weapons, radio stations, and secret documents. Some of these materials concerned plans for the defense of Poland's eastern borders and were of considerable value to Soviet military intelligence. The underground structures were reorganized in accordance with new principles of fortification. Soviet engineers created a centralized control system for all underground communications and installed modern communications and signaling equipment. Particular attention was paid to chemical protection. After the experience of World War I, it became clear that underground structures had to be prepared for the use of poisonous substances by the enemy. The modernization also affected the supply system. Old warehouses were expanded and converted to store modern types of ammunition and military equipment. New reservoirs were built for fuel, and technical fluids needed to maintain vehicles and tanks. The water supply system also underwent a major upgrade with the installation of electric pumps and filtration equipment. Documents from that period indicate the creation of special secret facilities in the most protected areas of the underground system. These premises were intended to house the headquarters of the High Command in the event of war, store particularly important documents, and house communications equipment with Moscow. Access to such facilities was restricted to a limited circle of senior officers. An interesting feature of the Soviet period was the creation of underground workshops and technical services. Spacious galleries housed repair bases for weapons and equipment, medical stations, and even small production areas. This turned the underground part of the fortress into a self-sufficient complex capable of meeting the needs of the garrison in conditions of prolonged isolation. Special attention was paid to camouflage and disinformation. Many entrances to the underground structures were carefully camouflaged, and some of the galleries were used to create false objects designed to mislead potential enemies. Alternative and reserve entrances were created, the existence of which was known only to a small circle of insiders. Declassified archives contain information that the fortress's underground passages housed warehouses of special ammunition, the nature of which remains classified to this day. Indirect evidence suggests that these may have been experimental samples of chemical or bacteriological weapons, but there is no documentary evidence to support this. Only specially trained officers with special access were allowed into these warehouses. By the spring of 1941, the Brest Fortress was a modern fortification complex in which the underground section played a key role. New technical solutions introduced by Soviet specialists significantly increased the combat capabilities of the fortifications. However, many of the new secrets of the underground passages did not have time to be tested in real combat conditions. The war began too suddenly and too quickly. The 22nd of June, 1941, forever changed the fate of the Brest Fortress and its underground structures. At 4 o'clock in the morning, when the first shells of German artillery rained down on the barracks and fortifications, many defenders of the fortress were saved only because they managed to take cover in the underground galleries. The attack was so sudden that most of the garrison did not have time to organize their defensive positions, and the underground communications became the only salvation for hundreds of people. The first hours of the war demonstrated the critical importance of the underground defense system. While artillery fire raged on the surface and aerial bombs exploded, resistance groups formed in the deep casemates. Senior Lieutenant Kijavatov, Major Gavrilov, Lieutenant Vinogradov, and other officers used underground passages to communicate between different defense sectors and coordinate the actions of scattered units. Documents found after the war show that the Fortress Command had prepared plans in advance for using the underground structures in case of a surprise attack. Additional supplies of weapons, ammunition, and food were stored in secret chambers, designed for a prolonged defense. These hiding places proved vital when communication with the outside world was completely cut off. When planning the assault on the fortress, the German command underestimated the role of underground communications in the defense. German troops expected to quickly capture the fortifications after a massive artillery barrage, but they encountered fierce resistance from the defenders, who used the tunnels for surprise counterattacks. The appearance of Soviet soldiers from underground in the rear of the advancing units came as an unpleasant surprise to the Germans. Underground medical supplies and dressing stations played a special role in the first days of the defense. The fortress's medical service, headed by military Dr. Sinichkin, organized a hospital for the wounded in protected galleries. Operating rooms, located in deep casemates, continued to function even during the most intense shelling. Many defenders owe their lives to the doctors who worked in these underground medical facilities. The water supply system, modernized during the Soviet period, provided the defenders with drinking water throughout the siege. Artesian wells, protected by thick ceilings, continued to function despite damage to above-ground communications. This allowed the garrison to avoid one of the main problems of a long siege: a shortage of water. Underground workshops and armories allowed the defenders to repair damaged weapons and manufacture simple ammunition. Under conditions of complete blockade, these capabilities became critical to the continuation of the resistance. Documents indicate that homemade grenades and explosives were manufactured in the underground workshops from materials at hand. The psychological impact of the underground shelters on the defenders was enormous. The ability to hide from artillery fire and air raids in safe tunnels kept up the garrison's fighting spirit. Many who took part in the defense later said that it was the reliable shelters that let them keep fighting during the first critical days of the war. German documents from that period mention underground ghosts, the name given by German soldiers to Soviet fighters who appeared from tunnels in the most unexpected places. This tactic of warfare, based on the use of underground communications, was completely new to the Germans and required a revision of their plans to storm the fortress. Communication between different sections of the defense was maintained exclusively through underground communications. Old talking tubes and new telephone lines laid in the thickness of the walls allowed commanders to coordinate the actions of their units. A system of light signals via periscopic devices also continued to function, providing communication with the most remote positions. The first week of defense showed that the underground structures of the Brest Fortress not only fulfilled their defensive function, but also became the basis for active resistance against the superior forces of the enemy. The experience of using underground communications in modern warfare proved to be unique and was later studied by military experts around the world. By the end of June 1941, the German command realized that a quick capture of the Brest Fortress was impossible. The fierce resistance of the defenders, who used underground communications for maneuvering and cover, forced the Germans to resort to the tactic of methodically destroying each defensive node. One of the most brutal sieges in the history of the Great Patriotic War began, with the underground galleries becoming the last refuge for the heroic defenders. German troops under the command of General Schlipper were ordered to capture the fortress at any cost by the beginning of July. To achieve this goal, a tactic of total destruction was employed. Heavy artillery methodically destroyed every building. Aircraft struck the suspected entrances to the underground passages, and flamethrower units attempted to burn the defenders out of the tunnels. However, the underground defense system continued to function, ensuring the survival of resistance groups. The tragedy unfolded in the northern fort, where a group of defenders under the command of Major Gavrilov used underground casemates for a prolonged defense. German documents show that German sappers tried to blow up the entrances to the tunnels, but Soviet soldiers always found new ways to keep fighting. Fierce fighting took place not only on the surface, but also in the deepest galleries of the fortress. The events in the underground hospital were particularly dramatic, where military Dr. Sinichkin continued to operate on the wounded even after direct hits from shells on the building above the operating room. The underground medical facilities became the last refuge for dozens of seriously wounded soldiers who were unable to move on their own. When the Germans managed to block the main entrances to the hospital, attempts were made to evacuate the wounded through narrow technical tunnels. The water supply system became a critical problem by early July. Several direct hits damaged the main water mains, and the defenders were forced to use emergency reservoirs in the deepest parts of the underground system. The water shortage forced commanders to make tragic decisions about priorities. Water was given first to the wounded and children who were sheltering in the fortress, with the families of military personnel. Underground ammunition depots, which had seemed inexhaustible at the beginning of the siege, began to run low. The defenders were forced to conserve every bullet and use captured German weapons. The manufacture of homemade explosives continued in underground workshops, but the materials for this were becoming increasingly scarce. Some resistance groups were forced to fight with stones and improvised weapons. The German command resorted to a new tactic, flooding the underground galleries with water from the Mukovets River. This attempt was partially successful. Several low-lying tunnels were flooded, and the defenders lost access to important storage facilities. However, most of the underground system was located above the flood level, and the resistance continued. The Germans showed particular cruelty in their use of poison gas against the underground fortifications. Despite international conventions prohibiting the use of chemical weapons, German troops repeatedly attempted to poison the defenders with gas. The ventilation system provided partial protection against these attacks, but in some isolated areas, tragic cases of poisoning of civilians and wounded soldiers occurred. By July 20th, resistance in the fortress had virtually ceased, but isolated groups of defenders continued to hide in the deepest and most inaccessible parts of the underground system. Major Gavrilov was captured only on July 23rd, after the Germans managed to discover his hiding place in one of the secret bunkers. His prolonged resistance was made possible by the complex system of underground communications. Documents found after the war indicate that some defenders of the fortress may have been hiding in the underground passages for much longer than the official date of the end of the defense. German patrols periodically reported ghost shooters who appeared from underground as late as August and September. This information has not been documented, but it indirectly indicates that the fortress's underground system could have sheltered people for months. The tragedy of the Brest Fortress demonstrated both the strength and limitations of underground defensive structures. On the one hand, they allowed a small garrison to resist superior enemy forces for much longer than would have been possible with conventional defenses. On the other hand, the complete blockade and the enemy's use of new methods of warfare revealed the vulnerability of even the most sophisticated fortifications. After the capture of the Brest Fortress at the end of July 1941, the German command was faced with the need to thoroughly investigate the underground structures. Fierce fighting showed that German assault plans seriously underestimated the complexity and extent of the underground defense system. Now it was necessary not only to secure the captured territory from possible saboteurs, but also to study the unique experience of Soviet fortification for use in their own defensive projects. The first surveys of the underground passages were carried out with extreme caution. German sappers feared mine traps and ambushes that could have been left by retreating defenders. Indeed, mined areas and tripwires were discovered in several galleries, confirming the validity of these fears. Methodical inspection of each tunnel took several weeks and required the involvement of special engineering units. German archival documents declassified after the war contain detailed descriptions of the underground structures discovered in the fortress. German engineers were amazed by the scale and complexity of the system. The total length of the tunnels explored exceeded 15 kilometers, and there were more than 300 separate rooms. Particular admiration was aroused by the sophistication of the ventilation and water supply system, which allowed the garrison to exist autonomously for a long time. During the investigations, several secret warehouses with documents of considerable interest to German intelligence were discovered. Among the materials found were plans for the fortifications of other Soviet fortresses, instructions for organizing guerrilla warfare, and lists of NKVD agents in border areas. This information was immediately forwarded to headquarters in Berlin for further analysis and use. German specialists paid particular attention to the technical solutions used in the fortress's underground structures. The chemical attack defense system, methods of camouflaging entrances and exits, and the principles of organizing the internal defense of the tunnels were all carefully documented and studied. The data obtained was used in the construction of German defensive lines, in particular the Atlantic Wall. In October 1941, a group of Soviet soldiers was discovered in the underground passages of the fortress, where they had been hiding for more than 2 years, months after the official end of the defense. This discovery shocked the German command and forced them to review the procedures for inspecting captured fortifications. It became clear that even the most thorough inspection could miss hidden shelters where enemy fighters could be hiding. German documents mention strange finds in the deepest parts of the underground system. These include sealed chambers that could not be opened by conventional means and tunnels leading to unknown depths. Some of these structures were only superficially explored due to a lack of time and special equipment. Part of the fortress's secrets remain undiscovered. In the winter of 1941 to 1942, the underground structures were used by the Germans as warehouses and shelters. However, their attempts to adapt the tunnels to their own needs were met with technical difficulties. The heating system, designed for Soviet equipment, did not work well with German installations. In addition, constant ventilation problems made long stays in the underground passages uncomfortable. Interesting data can be found in the reports of German archaeologists who were called in to survey the fortress in the spring of 1942. They discovered traces of older fortifications dating back to various historical periods. Under the Soviet and Polish structures, the remains of 19th-century Russian fortifications were found, and even deeper, fragments of earlier defensive structures. The objects found in the underground passages presented a particular mystery, as they did not correspond to the official data on the garrison's armament. Among them were samples of experimental weapons, radio equipment of an unknown type, and containers with classified chemicals. These findings indicated that the fortress was used not only as an ordinary military base, but also as a testing ground for new types of weapons. By the summer of 1942, the German command had come to the conclusion that a complete investigation of the underground system of the Brest Fortress would require significantly more time and resources than originally planned. Many sections of the underground passages remained unexplored, posing a constant threat to the safety of the occupying forces. This situation persisted until the liberation of the fortress by Soviet troops in July 1944. The liberation of the Brest Fortress by Soviet troops in July 1944 opened a new chapter in the study of its underground structures. Immediately after the expulsion of the German occupiers, the Soviet command was faced with the task of not only restoring the military significance of the fortress, but also conducting a detailed investigation of what had happened in the underground passages during the 3 years of occupation. The first researchers were confronted with a picture that was radically different from the pre-war state of the underground system. The German troops left behind many changes in the configuration of the underground structures. Some tunnels were blocked or partially destroyed, while others were redesigned to meet the needs of the occupying army. Soviet engineers discovered that German specialists had carried out extensive work to study and document the underground system, drawing up detailed plans that were in many ways more accurate than the pre-war Soviet documentation. The first post-war investigations were led by engineer Lieutenant Colonel Georgy Pavlovich Orlovsky, who had previously participated in the pre-war modernization of the fortress. His team began a systematic survey of all accessible underground facilities with the aim of restoring them to their original purpose. In the first weeks of work, it was established that the Germans had discovered and investigated several secret facilities, the existence of which the Soviet command had not suspected. Of particular interest were the German archives, some of which had been preserved in the underground rooms. These documents contained detailed descriptions of the technical solutions used in the construction of the tunnels, as well as an analysis of the effectiveness of various defensive elements. German experts highly praised the quality of Soviet military engineering, particularly noting the sophistication of the ventilation and chemical attack protection systems. In the winter of 1944 to 1945, specialists from the USSR Academy of Sciences joined the research. Archaeologist Mikhail Konstantinovich Karger organized the first scientific excavations in those parts of the fortress where more ancient structures were believed to exist. This work led to sensational discoveries. Fragments of fortifications dating back to various historical periods were found under Soviet and German layers. Archaeological research revealed that the modern underground system of the fortress is a complex, multi-layered structure that was formed over more than a century. The deepest layers contained the remains of the original Russian fortifications from the 1830s, above which were Polish additions from the interwar period, and the upper levels represented Soviet modernizations from the pre-war years. In the spring of 1945, one of the most mysterious discoveries in the history of the fortress's exploration was made. In a deep shaft that the Germans had tried to explore but were unable to fully uncover, Soviet specialists discovered a sealed chamber with metal containers of unknown purpose. Chemical analysis showed that the containers held substances that didn't match standard military equipment from that time. The nature of these materials was classified, and only top-level experts were allowed to know about them. In the summer of 1945, the research got more organized. A special commission was set up under the leadership of Major General Alexei Fedorovich Krenov of the engineering troops, which was tasked with compiling a complete catalog of all the underground structures of the fortress. The Commission's work continued for more than 2 years and resulted in the creation of detailed plans, many of which remain classified to this day. One of the most important discoveries was the discovery of a system of tunnels extending far beyond the official territory of the fortress. These underground communications connected the main fortifications with remote observation posts and warehouses located in the surrounding forests. The existence of such tunnels explained how the defenders of the fortress were able to receive supplies and maintain contact with the outside world even under complete blockade. Researchers also drew attention to eyewitness accounts from residents of Brest who, during the war years, observed strange phenomena associated with the fortress's underground passages. Many told of underground noises coming from beneath the ground months after the end of the fighting, of mysterious sinkholes in the city, and of accidental discoveries of entrances to unknown tunnels during construction work. Particular attention was paid to the search for possible burial sites of the fortress defenders in the underground galleries. Unfortunately, many heroic fighters died in the tunnels during the defense, and their remains required a proper burial. The search was complicated by the fact that some of the galleries were blocked or flooded, and access to some areas remained technically impossible. In 1947, military history experts joined the research and began collecting testimonies from participants in the defense of the fortress. Interviews with surviving defenders, former prisoners of war, and witnesses to the fighting made it possible to reconstruct a detailed picture of the use of underground structures during the critical days of June and July 1941. Many details of the defense became known only thanks to these interviews. Technical expertise showed that the underground system of the fortress had retained its functionality much better than the above-ground structures. Most of the tunnels were not critically damaged. The water supply system continued to function, and the ventilation shafts provided acceptable conditions for human habitation. This discovery was of great importance for planning the restoration work. By the end of the 1940s, it became clear that a complete investigation of the underground structures of the Brest Fortress would require decades of work. Many areas remained inaccessible due to technical problems, while others were classified for reasons of state security. Nevertheless, the research already carried out significantly expanded understanding of the history of the fortress and the role of underground fortifications in its defense. Documents from that period indicate plans to create a museum in the fortress, which was to include an exhibition dedicated to the underground structures. However, changes in the international situation and the beginning of the Cold War led to the classification of much of the research material. Most of the information about the underground system of the fortress was classified as top secret and became inaccessible to the general public. The early 1950s marked a radical change in the Soviet authorities' attitude towards the underground structures of the Brest Fortress. The escalation of international tensions and the unfolding of the Cold War led to most of the information about the underground system being classified. The fortress was given a new status. It became not only a historical monument, but also a strategically important site requiring special security measures. In 1952, a decision was made to preserve the most important parts of the underground system. A special commission headed by Lieutenant General Vasily Ivanovich Chuikov determined which parts of the tunnels should remain accessible to researchers and tourists and which should be closed to visitors. Many entrances to the secret galleries were bricked up, and documentation on their location was transferred to special archives. The creation of the Brest Hero Fortress Memorial Complex in 1965 required a review of the accessibility of underground structures to the general public. Some of the galleries were adapted for museum exhibitions, but most of the tunnels remained closed. The official position was that this was necessary to ensure the safety of visitors, but the real reasons were related to state secrecy. During this period, various myths and legends began to form around the fortress's underground passages. Local residents told of strange sounds coming from underground, mysterious sinkholes in the vicinity of the fortress, and accidental discoveries of entrances to unknown tunnels. The authorities did not encourage the spread of such rumors, but they could not completely suppress them. Some of these stories had a real basis related to ongoing secret research. In the 1960s, special attention was paid to the search for and removal of possible remnants of chemical weapons in underground storage facilities. After the war, warehouses of toxic substances left behind by German troops were repeatedly discovered in various parts of Europe. Although there was no official information about the presence of such weapons in the Brest Fortress, special teams regularly inspected underground facilities using chemical detectors. In the 1970s, large-scale work began to reinforce and preserve the underground structures. Many tunnels required major repairs. In the 30 years after the war, the brickwork had partially collapsed, and the drainage system was no longer able to cope with the groundwater. The repair work was carried out in strict secrecy, and even the workers did not have full information about the scale of the underground system. An interesting phenomenon of this period was the emergence of independent researchers, enthusiasts who tried to penetrate the closed parts of the underground. Some of them were local historians, and historians who were genuinely interested in the fortress's past, while others were simply thrill seekers. The authorities cracked down hard on such attempts, but it was virtually impossible to completely control all entrances to the extensive underground system. In the 1980s, during the period of perestroika and glasnost, the attitude toward secrecy surrounding the underground passages softened somewhat. Some wartime documents were declassified, and researchers gained access to previously closed archives. However, many materials relating to the post-war period and the current state of the underground system remained classified. KGB documents from that period, partially declassified in the 1990s, indicate that the fortress's underground tunnels were considered a potential base for sabotage groups in the event of war with NATO. Plans were developed to use the tunnels to hide important facilities and personnel, as well as to organize partisan resistance in occupied territory. Rumors about the location of secret military facilities in the fortress's underground passages were particularly widespread. There was talk of underground chemical weapons factories, bunkers for senior leadership, and even nuclear facilities. Most of these rumors had no basis in reality, but some pointed to secret civil defense facilities that did exist. By the end of the Soviet period, the underground system of the Brest Fortress was a complex structure that included both historical buildings and modern military facilities. The exact size and configuration of this system remained a state secret. Even museum staff had access only to a small part of the underground passages, and the full picture was known only to a narrow circle of military specialists. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the formation of an independent Belarus opened up new opportunities for researching the underground heritage of the fortress. However, many secrets from the Soviet period remain undisclosed, and access to the most interesting parts of the underground system is still restricted for security reasons and state secrecy. Over the long decades after the war, a whole layer of folk legends, myths, and rumors developed around the underground structures of the Brest Fortress, sometimes bizarrely intertwined with real historical facts. An analysis of these legends is of particular interest, as it allows us to understand how the mass consciousness forms ideas about mysterious and inaccessible objects shrouded in secrecy. One of the most widespread legends is the story of the gold of the Brest Fortress, treasures from various historical periods allegedly hidden in the dungeons. According to these stories, the secret chambers of the fortress held the Tsar's gold reserves, taken from St. Petersburg before the Revolution, Polish national treasures from the interwar period, and even valuables looted by the Germans. These legends have no documentary evidence, but their persistence can be explained by the fact that the underground chambers were indeed used to store important materials. There is some truth to the stories about the ghost defenders, Soviet soldiers who allegedly continued to hide in the underground chambers for months and even years after the end of the defense. It is documented that the last groups of defenders were discovered by the Germans only in October 1941, and some sources mention the discovery of lone fighters even later. However, legends have taken this reality to the point of absurdity, claiming that individual defenders could survive in the tunnels for years. A special category is made up of legends about secret weapons, allegedly developed and tested in the fortress's underground tunnels. Stories about underground laboratories where chemical and biological weapons were created, about missile launchers hidden underground, and even about nuclear facilities in the catacombs of the fortress were widespread during the Cold War. Most of these stories are figments of the imagination, but some may have been based on real tests of experimental weapons. Stories about an underground city beneath the Brest Fortress became an interesting phenomenon. According to these legends, beneath the official tunnels and galleries, there is a much more extensive system of underground structures, including living quarters, production workshops, hospitals, and even an underground railway. These stories are partly based on real facts. The underground system of the fortress is indeed very extensive, but its scale has been greatly exaggerated in the popular imagination. There is documentary evidence of mysterious sounds coming from the depths of the fortress. Many residents of Brest have reported underground rumblings, metallic sounds, and even voices heard in various parts of the city over the years. Most of these phenomena can be explained by natural causes: the movement of groundwater, the operation of ventilation systems, or technical work in accessible parts of the underground passages. However, some cases remain unexplained. Real facts form the basis of legends about unknown tunnels periodically discovered during construction work in Brest. Indeed, when laying communications and erecting new buildings, workers repeatedly stumbled upon unknown underground structures. Some of them turned out to be parts of an old drainage system or the remains of destroyed buildings, but others were real tunnels of unknown purpose. A special place in the folklore of the fortress is occupied by stories about black archaeologists, treasure hunters who allegedly illegally enter the underground passages in search of historical valuables. These stories are based on real events. Attempts to illegally enter the closed parts of the underground system were indeed made, and not always unsuccessfully. However, the scale and results of such activities are greatly exaggerated in legends. Scientific analysis of legends about the fortress's underground passages shows that most of them arose as a result of distortion of real facts. The secrecy surrounding the underground structures during the Soviet period created fertile ground for the emergence of the most fantastic versions. The lack of official information was filled with rumors and speculation, which over time acquired the status of common knowledge. Modern researchers distinguish several categories of legends about the underground passages: historically based on real but distorted facts; politically motivated, related to propaganda from various periods; commercially profitable, spread to attract tourists; and purely fantastical, having no factual basis. An important aspect of studying legends is their influence on the formation of public opinion about the fortress and its historical role. Many myths contributed to the growth of interest in the history of the fortress, but at the same time created distorted perceptions of real events. The task of modern historians is to separate documented facts from legends, while preserving an understanding of the cultural value of folk traditions as part of historical memory. With Belarus gaining independence in 1991, a new stage in the study of the underground structures of the Brest Fortress began. Changes in the political situation and the gradual declassification of archives opened up opportunities for researchers that were unavailable during the Soviet period. Modern archaeological methods and new technologies have provided a much more accurate picture of the true scale and complexity of the fortress's underground system. In 1994, an international archaeological expedition was formed under the leadership of Professor Nikolai Petrovich Krivaltsevich of Minsk University. For the first time, foreign specialists, including German archaeologists, took part in the research and were given access to wartime documents from their own archives. This cooperation made it possible to compare data from different sources and obtain a more objective picture of events. The use of ground-penetrating radar and other non-destructive testing methods led to sensational discoveries. The underground fortress system turned out to be much more extensive than previously thought. Previously unknown galleries stretching up to 3 kilometers from the main fortifications were discovered. Some of these tunnels went down to a depth of 25 meters, which significantly exceeded the depth of previously explored objects. Of particular interest was the discovery of a system of underground structures not directly related to military purposes. Archaeologists found the remains of underground workshops, storage rooms, and even residential complexes that could have been used by civilians during various historical periods. These findings forced a rethinking of the functional purpose of the underground part of the fortress. In 2000, one of the most significant discoveries of modern times was made. During restoration work in the Eastern Fort, archaeologists discovered a sealed chamber containing an archive of documents from the First World War. These materials included detailed plans of the fortress, correspondence from the command, and even the personal diaries of the defenders. Many documents contained information about secret facilities whose existence had not previously been confirmed. The use of modern dating methods made it possible to establish a more accurate chronology of the construction of various parts of the underground system. It turned out that some tunnels were built much earlier than the official date of the fortress's construction. This discovery indicates that the underground fortifications could have been built during the Polish rule or even earlier. The study of the construction technologies used in the construction of underground galleries yielded interesting results. An analysis of the composition of the mortar and the masonry techniques showed that different technical solutions were used at different times. This made it possible to create a kind of technological map of the development of the underground system and to highlight the contribution of each historical era. In 2010, an international team of archaeologists began exploring the deepest parts of the underground system. The use of special equipment for working in conditions of high humidity and limited oxygen access made it possible to penetrate previously inaccessible areas. There, rooms were discovered that had not been used since World War I and had preserved the authentic atmosphere of that period. Modern researchers are particularly interested in the environmental aspects of the condition of the underground structures. Changes in the region's hydrological regime associated with economic activity have led to the flooding of some parts of the tunnel system. This poses a threat to the preservation of historical objects and requires the development of special protective measures. The use of three-dimensional laser scanning has revolutionized the study of underground structures. This technology has made it possible to create accurate digital models of all accessible rooms and galleries. The data obtained is used not only for scientific research, but also to create virtual tours that allow visitors to visit areas of the underground system that are inaccessible to tourists. Modern research has revealed a number of mysteries that remain unexplained. These include strange geometric symbols found on the walls of some deep galleries, incomprehensible technical devices from the Soviet period, and rooms with unusual architecture that does not correspond to known standards of military construction. These findings are the subject of further research. An important area of contemporary work is cooperation with international organizations for the preservation of historical heritage. The underground structures of the Brest Fortress are considered a unique monument of military architecture, requiring a special approach to conservation and study. Plans are being developed to include the most valuable sites in the UNESCO World Heritage List. The underground structures of the Brest Fortress have taken a special place in Belarusian and world culture, becoming a symbol of unyielding courage and a source of inspiration for artists, writers, and filmmakers. In the decades after the war, the image of the heroic defenders who fought in the underground galleries transformed from a historical fact into a cultural myth that continues to influence the mass consciousness and shape perceptions of war and heroism. The first works of art, dedicated to the defense of the fortress, appeared in the 1940s, but it was the underground component of the defense that became the most romanticized element of these stories. In his famous book, Brest Fortress, writer Sergei Smirnov was the first to describe in detail the role of tunnels and casemates in the heroic defense. His stories about the soldiers who continued to fight from underground shelters became the basis for many subsequent works. The cinematic interpretation of the events in the fortress reached its peak in the film I Am a Russian Soldier in 1958, and especially in the film The Immortal Garrison in 1956. Directors actively used the image of underground labyrinths as a metaphor for the indomitable spirit of the defenders. The scenes of battles in the tunnels, filmed in studios, created a certain visual stereotype in the mass consciousness of what underground battles looked like. The 2010 film Fortress occupies a special place in cultural memory, with its significant focus on underground structures. The filmmakers were given access to the real tunnels of the fortress for the first time, which allowed them to achieve maximum authenticity in their depiction of the underground battles. However, even here, historical truth was sacrificed for artistic expression. The literary tradition associated with the fortress's underground passages developed not only in the official sphere, but also unofficially. During the period of perestroika, works appeared that attempted to interpret the tragedy of the fortress from a more critical perspective. Some authors used the image of underground tunnels as a metaphor for the hidden aspects of history, those facts that had long been silenced by official propaganda. For a long time, the museum exhibition in the Brest Hero Fortress Memorial Complex was limited to displaying only a small part of the underground structures. Visitors could see several restored casemates and tunnels, but the main part of the underground system remained inaccessible. This created a certain aura of mystery around the hidden galleries and fueled public interest in the forbidden parts of the fortress. In the 1990s, with the development of tourism and changes in the political situation, the first attempts were made to commercially exploit the legends about the underground passages. Travel agencies began offering mysterious tours of supposedly secret tunnels, although in reality, the routes only passed through officially open areas. Nevertheless, such programs were very popular among military history enthusiasts. The Internet era brought new forms of cultural exploration of the fortress's underground passages. Specialized websites, forums, and blogs dedicated to exploring the secrets of the Brest Fortress appeared. Enthusiasts exchanged photographs, plans, eyewitness accounts, and their own theories about hidden rooms. Some of this information was reliable, but a significant portion was speculation and fantasy. Computer games also turned to the theme of the Brest Fortress underground passages. Several strategy and shooter games used the fortress locations, including its underground part, as a game space. Although historical accuracy in such games was usually sacrificed for the sake of gameplay, they contributed to the popularization of the topic among young people. Popular science literature in recent years has attempted to strike a balance between accuracy and entertainment. Authors use declassified archives and the results of modern research to debunk myths and present a realistic picture of events. However, even serious studies retain a certain romanticization of the image of the underground defenders. Educational programs related to the history of the fortress increasingly include special sections devoted to underground structures. School children learn not only about the heroism of the defenders, but also about the technical features of the fortifications and the evolution of military engineering. This approach helps to form a deeper understanding of historical processes. Contemporary artists and sculptors also turn to the theme of the fortress's underground passages in their works. Installations imitating the atmosphere of underground galleries are exhibited in museums and galleries. These works attempt to convey not so much historical facts as the emotional impact of the space where tragic events took place. The memorial function of the fortress's underground passages takes on special significance in the context of preserving historical memory. For many people, visiting the underground casemates becomes a kind of ritual of remembrance, a way to honor the defenders' feat. This creates a special atmosphere in museum exhibitions and influences visitors' perception of historical events. At the beginning of the 21st century, despite decades of research and the partial declassification of archives, the underground system of Brest Fortress continues to hold many secrets. Modern technologies have significantly expanded our knowledge of the scale and complexity of this underground network, but at the same time have revealed new mysteries that pose unexpected questions for researchers. What exactly lies hidden in the depths of the ancient tunnels remains a subject of scientific debate and public interest. The latest geophysical studies conducted in 2020 using state-of-the-art equipment have revealed anomalies in the structure of the underground structures that cannot be easily explained. Ground-penetrating radar has detected the presence of voids at depths significantly exceeding the known levels of the tunnel system. Some of these anomalies extend to a depth of up to 40 meters, which is twice the depth of the lowest explored galleries. The mysterious structure discovered under the central part of the citadel has attracted particular attention from researchers. Geophysical data indicate the presence of a large room or system of rooms that cannot be accessed through the known tunnels. Preliminary calculations show that the volume of this space could reach several thousand cubic meters. The purpose and date of construction of this object remain unclear. Documents discovered in Russian archives in 2018 contain references to a special project implemented in the Brest Fortress in the 1950s. The nature of this project remains classified to this day, but indirect evidence points to the construction of additional underground structures not related to historical fortifications. This work was carried out by special engineering units and financed directly from Moscow. The study of underground water flows in the area of the fortress yielded intriguing results. Hydrologists discovered that the natural groundwater system had been artificially altered in the post-war period. Some underground streams were redirected, and artificial reservoirs were created in a number of places. The purpose of these hydraulic engineering works remains unclear, but they may have been related to supplying water to secret facilities. A special category of mysteries is represented by finds of objects and materials that do not fit into the known history of the fortress. In 2019, fragments of technical equipment manufactured using technologies that do not correspond to any known period of use of the fortress were discovered in one of the deep galleries. Chemical analysis showed that these materials contain rare metals not characteristic of ordinary military equipment. Modern acoustic studies have confirmed long-standing reports by local residents of strange sounds coming from the underground passages. Special equipment has recorded low-frequency vibrations whose source cannot be localized. These sounds are periodic in nature and are not associated with any known technical systems of the fortress. The nature of this phenomenon remains a subject of scientific debate. An analysis of the construction technologies used in various parts of the underground system revealed the use of methods that were ahead of their time. In some sections of the tunnels, structural elements have been found that theoretically could not have been created using the technologies of the corresponding historical periods. This suggests either the involvement of unknown specialists in the construction or the use of experimental technologies. Researchers are particularly interested in the hermetically sealed chambers discovered in the deepest parts of the system. Attempts to open these rooms using conventional methods have been unsuccessful. The metal doors blocking access to these chambers are made of an unknown alloy and cannot be opened with standard tools. Speculation about the contents of these rooms ranges from archives of secret documents to samples of experimental weapons. Digital modeling of the underground system, carried out using all available data, revealed logical inconsistencies in the layout of the tunnels. Some galleries lead in directions that have no obvious military or economic significance. This gives the impression that part of the underground system was built for purposes unrelated to the defense of the fortress. An international group of experts working on the study of the fortress since 2021 has concluded that a complete investigation of the underground structures will require many more years of work. Some of the sites remain inaccessible for study for technical reasons, while others are inaccessible for security reasons. Some parts of the underground system may contain hazardous materials or structures requiring special precautions. In 2022, the Belarusian government decided to set up a special commission to study the underground heritage of the fortress. The commission includes historians, archaeologists, engineers, and representatives of the special services. The commission's work is being conducted in a limited public mode, which maintains an atmosphere of mystery around the undisclosed secrets of the underground passages. Modern research shows that the Brest Fortress and its underground system are a unique historical site, the study of which is far from complete. Each new discovery raises more questions than it answers. The secrets hidden in the depths of the ancient tunnels continue to attract the attention of researchers and remain one of the most intriguing mysteries of Eastern European military history.